The storm arrived before midnight, swallowing the royal capital in a restless darkness, and in the middle of that storm, a boy in tattered clothes ran barefoot through the empty streets as if the entire world was chasing him. Rainwater stung his eyes, his thin body trembled from cold, and yet he clutched a small wooden box to his chest like it was the last breath of his life. Every thunderclap felt like the sky reminding him of what he had lost, and every gust of wind whispered the same truth he had been running from that only hours ago. He was a prince and now he was nothing more than a beggar. Sparkles, if you believe in kindness, humanity, and second chances, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support truly motivates us to bring more stories like this. His name was Aaren, and he had grown up inside golden walls where the world's cruelty never touched him. Servants bowed to him, ministers praised him, and his father, the king, believed he would one day be the heart of the kingdom. But privilege had made Aaren blind to the hardships beyond the palace gates. Every evening he would look down from his balcony and see the people walking like tiny moving dots, unaware of their pain, unaware of their hunger, unaware of the stories hidden behind tired faces. He lived in a glittering bubble until the night it burst forever. The king had been betrayed by his closest general, a man who once swore loyalty with proud eyes but harbored jealousy for years. The coup came with brutal speed. Soldiers Aaren once trusted stormed the palace, torches blazing, steel glinting like fangs. The king was taken, the queen was dragged away, and Aaren fled in confusion, grabbing nothing but the small wooden box, the last gift his mother had ever given him. He didn't even know whether his parents were alive. He had simply run, guided only by instinct and fear. By sunrise, the once pampered prince found himself curled between old crates behind a bakery, shivering inside clothes that were now heavy with dried mud. His hands were cut, his feet swollen, and hunger gnawed at him like an angry animal. When he finally stepped out into the bustling morning streets, he didn't recognize his own kingdom. People ignored him as if he were a shadow. Some pushed him aside, others sneered, and for the first time in his life, Aaren realized what it felt like to be invisible. He wandered for hours until he reached the old marketplace, where dozens of beggars sat on the ground with bowls and torn cloths spread before them. Children with sunken eyes huddled close to their mothers. Elderly men with trembling hands waited for a few coins tossed without care. Aaren felt something in his chest loosen painfully, like a knot coming undone. He never knew this part of the kingdom existed. He never knew suffering could sit so openly under the same sun that warmed the palace gardens. With no food and no shelter, Aaren hesitantly took a place among them. A young boy with dirt on his cheeks stared at him and asked if he was new. Aaren nodded, unable to speak. The boy handed him half a stale bun, saying it was all he had left. Aaren stared at the bread, stunned. In the palace he had wasted food without a thought, and yet a starving child had shared his only meal. That single act of kindness broke something inside Aaren, something he didn't know needed breaking. Days turned into a week. Aaren learned how to survive the streets the way a child learns to walk slowly, painfully, full of stumbles. He learned that cold nights were the real enemy and that hunger was a steady companion. He learned that people judged you by your torn clothes more than your heart. And slowly, the spoiled prince vanished, replaced by a boy who understood desperation. What surprised him most was how the poorest people were often the kindest. They shared whatever little they had, they laughed despite their struggles, and they looked after each other without hesitation. Among them was the old woman who sold paper flowers, her fingers twisted with age but her smile always gentle. There was Mira, the young girl who had lost her parents and worked odd jobs to feed her little brother. There was Rafi, the boy who first shared his bread, who taught Aaren the right places to sleep without getting chased away. These strangers soon became the family he never knew he needed. One afternoon, as Aaren sat beneath an abandoned archway holding the wooden box in his lap, Mira approached him. She had noticed how protectively he guarded the box and asked what was inside. At first, Aaren hesitated. No one here knew he was a prince. He feared being rejected or treated differently. But something in her eyes made him trust her. Slowly, he opened the box. Inside lay a simple silver ring, delicate, engraved with the royal emblem and the last memory of his mother. Mira touched it delicately, and Aaren finally told her the truth: who he was, what he had lost, and how he had ended up here. To his shock, Mira didn't step back in fear or gasp in awe. Instead, she placed a comforting hand on his arm and said that prince or beggar, pain felt the same in every heart. Her words became a quiet anchor in Aaren's storm. From that day, something inside him began to change, not with guilt but with purpose. He realized he couldn't reclaim his life by hiding. He had to fight not only for himself, but for the people who had unknowingly saved him from breaking apart. Aaren began helping wherever he could. He carried water for the elderly, shared whatever food he received, cleaned the sleeping spaces they used each night, and even took small labor tasks in nearby shops. Though physically exhausted, he felt a strange sense of peace with every good deed. For once, he wasn't living for royal expectations, he was living for humanity. The people of the streets had shown him more loyalty than the men in armor who betrayed his father. But fate was not done testing him. Rumors spread throughout the city that the general who led the coup was now hunting for the missing prince. Aaren's heart pounded every time soldiers patrolled the streets. He feared for the ones who sheltered him. Rafi warned him to keep to the narrow alleyways. Mira insisted he stay hidden with the ring safely tucked away. But Aaren knew that living in fear wouldn't help anyone. One night, while he sat with Rafi on the steps of an abandoned temple, he heard the whispers of the marketplace people about rising taxes, food shortages, and cruelty from the new regime. Aaren listened intently, guilt weighing heavy on him. This was his kingdom, his people suffering while he hid under shadows. A fire ignited in him, a fire he never knew he possessed. He remembered his father's words: the prince's duty is not to rule from above but to stand among his people, to carry their burdens as if they were his own. It was then he made the boldest decision of his life. He would reclaim his kingdom, not for the throne, but for the people who deserved better. But he couldn't do it alone. Slowly, he began rallying the street folk, listening to their stories, learning about the hidden corners of the city, the tunnels beneath old buildings, the guard routines, and the weaknesses of the general's hold. They were the invisible people of the kingdom, ignored, underestimated, and overlooked, but they knew the city better than any soldier. As days blended into nights, a quiet resistance formed among the poor, led by a boy they believed to be one of them, a beggar with a strange strength in his eyes. They didn't follow him because he was a prince. They followed him because he cared, and sometimes that was more powerful than any crown. The final moment came on a cold morning when the general planned a grand ceremony to announce his rule. The plaza was filled with soldiers and nobles, all ignorant of the quiet storm brewing beneath their feet. Aaren and his group used hidden passages to reach the inner courtyard, where loyal guards, still secretly devoted to the king, waited. Chaos erupted quickly. The marketplace people created distractions, setting small fires and drawing soldiers away while Aaren slipped into the heart of the palace. It was surreal walking through the marble halls again, once warm and alive, now eerily silent under the general's iron rule. Aaren's heartbeat thundered in his ears as he made his way toward the throne room. There, in a moment seared into his memory forever, he found his father weak but alive, imprisoned behind iron bars. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange Aaren felt years of distance, pride, and privilege collapse. He wasn't the same boy who once lived here, and his father, seeing the dirt-stained hands of his son, understood without a single word that Aaren had survived something far greater than hardship. Breaking the lock, he helped his father stand. The king, despite his weakness, placed his trembling hand on Aaren's cheek, whispering a single line that would stay with him forever. You left as a prince, but you returned as a leader. Together, with the help of the loyal guards and the bravery of the marketplace people, they confronted the general. The battle that followed shook the palace floors, steel clashing, shouts echoing, dust rising in violent clouds. In the final moment, when Aaren stood face to face with a man who stole everything from him, something unexpected happened. Instead of rage, Aaren felt an overwhelming wave of clarity. He didn't strike out for revenge. He simply stepped aside, allowing justice, not hatred, to finish what needed to be done. That single act of restraint marked the true difference between a tyrant and a rightful heir. When the dust settled and the palace doors were thrown open to the public, the people saw not a pampered prince but a boy who bore the scars of their struggles. A boy who lived among them, starved with them, survived storms with them, and learned compassion through their kindness. When he stepped toward the balcony, the crowd erupted into a roar not of fear or forced loyalty, but of hope. The king reinstated order, but it was Aaren who became the voice of the streets. He used the royal treasury to restore the slums, provide food, and offer shelter to every child who had once slept on cold stones like he had. He created new laws that protected the poor, ensured fair wages, and demanded respect for every citizen, regardless of wealth. And whenever he felt overwhelmed, he visited the marketplace, where Rafi, Mira, and the old flower lady still carried traces of the life that shaped him. Aaren never forgot those days of hunger or the wooden box he clutched during the storm. He kept the ring close, not as a symbol of royalty but as a reminder of where he came from, what he endured, and the people who gave him a second life. Read, if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps these stories alive. Before the ending, I have a small request to please comment below what lesson you learned from this story. Aaren had once been a prince by blood, but the streets had given him a crown far more valuable, the crown of humanity. And for the rest of his life, he ruled not from a throne of gold, but from a heart shaped by struggle, compassion, and the unwavering belief that even a beggar can rise to become a king.